I've filled in all of the insides of the cone, keeping in mind that the insides on this side, because of the light hitting more directly, will affect the shadows that are coming into the cone. So these, on this side, they will basically be lighter. And on this side, because they're farther away from the direct light, they will be darker. Now, I have not put in any contour definition yet. These are just our first basic step, which is the way you should always work. Simple to complex. This is the dark side, this is the light side, and then we will go in and we will determine how much light is hit here, how much light is hit here, and where those will be rendered. But what I will do first now is decide on the values that have to go onto the cone itself and where the core shadows are and any ambient light that we might have. So I will start again on the side which is the darkest, and I will start with a 4H pencil first because that will be my lightest value, and that I'll take to the highlight. And we will have a little gradation in there to the highlight. On this side, we will have considerably more value. Again, it'll grade to the highlight. First, I'll put in a nice even value in order to have something of sound basis to work with. And then we will go directly to shading to the shadow area as the next step. And I will do this to each one of these cones. And as I go around the shape, around the almost Ferris wheel type of movement here, the core shadow and the shadow area will change because of where the light is hitting the cone on a particular angle. So now I've got this pretty much toned in. Now I'll start to go from the dark side and gradually build so that this cone starts to have some dimension. Again, I am not paying any attention to the ambient light just yet. So as you can see, I have rendered the first cone, and you will notice that on the other cones we still have the highlight is the same shape, the shadows are the same shape. It's just that what's going to happen is that the location of the shadows and the location of the highlights are changing as it goes around this pattern that we've created, or this form relationship. I am going to do the same thing with each one of these, creating the darks and the lights where they should be. And as you can see, for instance, here the highlight is on this side, so the dark side is going to be on this side, and this will be the lighter side shadow, so it'll be the reverse of this. I have not taken into consideration yet any ambient light, nor have I done any shading for the insides of these cones. I'm going to leave that for the last step in this process of rendering this exercise. So I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to render all of these cones so that the highlights are in the appropriate places. Now that we have the basic structure of all of our cones filled in, you can see that the shadows on the darker side of this overall unit are a little darker than the shadow areas on the lighter side. Remember that your light is coming in from this direction, so it will affect how the darker shadows on the lighter side will appear. Next thing I'm going to do is work with the concave sections of these forms. And as you will probably recall, you know that the darkest part on the convex side is closer to the lighter side. On the concave side is lighter on the dark side of the shadow and light and darker on the light side of the convex shadow. So what I'm going to do now is add more value to these areas here where the light is least available. And we will darken this side and not do anything to this side because we want that to remain relatively light, even though it's a concave surface, but it does go into the depth of the cone, and we want to be able to create that illusion. So I'm also going to go back to my 2H pencil and go even darker to create more depth. And I will even now go into my cone here and add what would be considered a coarse shadow, especially on this side where the light least affects the shadow area of the cone as it goes around into the back. And taking into account ambient light, we'll leave a little bit of light on this side, even though it's in shadow, but it will feel like the reflected light from the ambient light will make its impression. So I will go around and do all of these, and these will get a little tricky now because remember, here where the light is on the lightest shadow is on the left-hand side here, we're going to make this the area that is most dark. We don't want it to be quite as dark as what's going on in the dark section of these cones, but we do want it to have some shadow and depth. So that kind of gives you an idea of what's going to happen in these areas. Now, as you know, as things go darker into a pocket like this, the edge will appear darker because the light is not getting in there. And you will get a little light on the top surface of that concave cone. So that will appear lighter. Now these three are probably going to have the darkest shadows for these concave areas. And the light being farther away from those cones will also allow for more darkness in those concave sections. So we can really add some strong shadows, and you can see how the forms are starting to have some dimension, and you'll see as we go around to the other side that these will really stand out on this side of the complex form. Because all of these cones are on the same plane. And so it's only the light and where it hits on the surface of these forms that will determine how dark these pockets get and where the darkness will be placed. So you can see even at this point here, the darkest parts are here, and on this side, the darkest parts are in the opposite position. So we will go ahead and fill all of these in. So here we have the development of our multi-angular cones and how the light affects the surfaces depending on where the light is hitting that cone in a particular position. You'll notice that in the light area, there's very little in the way or to speak of ambient light. It's much too light because the light is coming in directly here. We see a little bit more ambient light among these surfaces, and then you can see also that the interiors of these cones, where there's more light, where the light gets to the interior, you can see that even those shadow areas are considerably lighter than those cones that are farther away from the light, and the interiors are farther away from the light. So the purpose of this is to help you to see when you are dealing with subject matter that the angle of perspective and the degree of distance that a subject is has a great effect on the appearance of the drawing when you are trying to create dimension.